Welcome to Calm Night ASMR, where gentle storytelling and peaceful soundscapes guide you into deep relaxation. Tonight, let the whispers of the sea and the glow of an old lighthouse carry you into a world of tranquility. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let yourself drift away on the tide of this dreamy tale. The boat creaked softly beneath you, a rhythmic sway that felt almost like a lullaby, rocking you in time with the slow, steady pulse of the ocean. Around you, the mist thickened, silver and weightless, curling like ribbons in the air, drifting and folding upon itself in an endless dance. It wrapped around your shoulders like a soft, unseen cloak, cool against your skin, but never chilling, just enough to make you aware of the world shifting, blurring at the edges. The scent of the sea clung to every breath, briny and rich, laced with the faintest notes of damp wood and seaweed. It was a scent both ancient and eternal, one that whispered of stories lost to the waves, of ships long vanished beyond the horizon. Yet in this moment, there was no horizon, only an endless stretch of grey, the sky and sea melting together into one seamless expanse, a world suspended in quiet stillness. No landmarks, no guiding stars, only the hush of water lapping against the hull, the occasional creak of weathered wood, and the rhythmic sigh of the ocean breathing in and out, slow and steady, like the rise and fall of a sleeping giant's chest. And then, through the shifting veil of mist, a light appeared. Not harsh or piercing, but steady and warm, pulsing gently like a beacon, calling out to those who wandered too far. It shimmered like a heartbeat in the darkness, a golden glow against the silver fog, promising warmth, safety, and stories waiting to be told. And then, through the haze, a light appeared, a soft, golden pulse in the endless mist, neither sharp nor blinding, but gentle, rhythmic, as if breathing with the tide. It flickered in and out of view, blurred by the drifting fog, yet unwavering, a quiet promise in the vastness of the sea. As your boat drifted closer, the shape of a lighthouse emerged from the mist, its tower standing tall and unshaken on the rocky edge of the island. Its weathered stones, worn smooth by wind and time, were veined with ivy, the dark green tendrils winding their way up the sturdy walls, as if nature itself sought refuge here. High above, the great lantern sat encased in its crown of glass, its panes fogged by the sea air, yet still catching the dim light, scattering it in fractured beams that shimmered like faint stars against the mist. The lighthouse was old, you could tell, ancient even, but there was no decay, no air of abandonment. Instead, it stood with quiet dignity, as though it had been watching over the sea for centuries, steadfast and patient, keeping its silent vigil through storm and stillness alike. The light it cast was not just for lost sailors or wandering ships. It felt like something more, something deeper. A beacon, yes, but also a guardian, a storyteller, a keeper of secrets whispered by the waves. The air around you seemed different now, heavier with meaning, charged with something unspoken, yet deeply familiar. You weren't just approaching a structure of stone and glass. You were arriving at a place meant to be found, a place that had been waiting for you all along. You stepped off the boat onto the shore, your feet sinking slightly into the damp, cool sand. The grains clung to your skin, smooth and fine, as if shaped by centuries of ebbing tides. The air was thick with salt, and the faintest trace of something herbal. Wild thyme, perhaps, or the ghost of old driftwood fires long extinguished. Behind you, the waves whispered their endless lullaby, rolling in soft and steady, their rhythm as ancient as the stars above. Each retreating wave left behind a glistening sheen on the shore, a mirror to the misty sky, before gathering itself and returning again, tireless and eternal. Ahead, the lighthouse stood solemn and waiting. The worn path leading to it was scattered with bits of sea glass polished smooth by the ocean's patience, their colours muted in the dim light. As you took your first steps forward, the mist curled around your ankles like a living thing, reluctant to let you go, yet gently guiding you onward. Then, just as you reached the lighthouse's heavy wooden door, it creaked open, not slowly, not ominously, but as though it had simply been waiting for you. The golden glow from within spilled into the mist, stretching long shadows across the stone threshold. In the doorway stood a figure, framed by the flickering lantern light. His presence was neither sudden nor startling. Rather, it felt as though he had always been there, just beyond sight, waiting with the patience of the tides. He was tall, his form draped in a heavy woolen sweater, its sleeves slightly frayed at the cuffs. In one hand, he held a lantern, its flame dancing in the draught, casting shifting patterns across his lined face. His eyes, dark and deep-set, glimmered like tide pools, catching the last light of dusk. He regarded you for a long moment, then nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and gravelly, but it carried warmth, the kind that settled deep in your bones, like the sound of stones tumbling together in the gentle rush of a stream. "Ah," he murmured, his tone edged with something like quiet amusement. "I've been expecting you." The old man, or perhaps he was something more, something beyond the simple shape of a man, stepped aside with the kind of patience that suggested he had known this moment would come long before you ever arrived. He did not rush, did not gesture hurriedly, but simply allowed the space to open before you, an invitation woven into the air itself. His heavy woolen sweater, worn and frayed at the elbows, smelled faintly of salt and old parchment, as if it had absorbed the very essence of the lighthouse over countless years. The thick fabric clung to his frame, its texture softened by time, a testament to its use in long, quiet nights spent watching over the sea. His lantern, small yet steady, cast a golden glow that flickered lazily with each shift of the mist, curling through the open doorway. The flame within seemed to move with purpose, never faltering, its light not just illuminating, but almost breathing, as if it too was alive. His face was carved with time, deep lines tracing paths across his skin, like rivers on a weathered map. But his eyes, oh his eyes, were something else entirely. Dark, deep-set and ancient, they shimmered in the dim light like twin pools of starlight, as if reflecting something more than just the fire. They held the weight of stories untold, of nights spent listening to the whispers of the waves and the sighs of the wind. They did not pierce or judge, but rather observed, as if measuring the very essence of your presence. There was a quiet magic in the way he moved, unhurried and deliberate, as though each step, each motion, was part of something greater, something unseen. It was as if time itself bent to his will here, stretching and folding to accommodate his existence. Perhaps he had been here for centuries, or perhaps he had only just arrived moments before you, shaped by the mist itself. The air around him seemed to hum, not with sound, but with a presence, a feeling that resonated deep within your chest. As he turned and stepped inside, the golden glow of the lantern danced along the stone walls, casting shifting shadows that moved as if they too were alive. Without a word, he beckoned you forward, into the warmth of the lighthouse, into whatever awaited beyond. Come in, he repeated, his voice carrying the weight of old tides and distant storms. His hand, weathered but steady, gestured toward the spiral staircase, winding upward into the tower's heart. The moment you stepped inside, a warmth settled around you, not just from the golden glow of the lanterns flickering along the walls, but something deeper, something woven into the very stones beneath your feet. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and pine, a comforting blend of old wood, polished by time, and the faint trace of oil used to keep the great light turning. The walls, curved and smooth, bore the faint marks of age, like the wrinkles on the old man's hands, proof of years spent watching, waiting, guiding those lost in the mist. Each step you took was met with a soft whisper of sound, the wood beneath your feet sighing with familiarity, as though countless souls had walked this path before you. The staircase curled upward in an elegant spiral, disappearing into the shadows above, where the rhythmic hum of the lighthouse's great machinery thrummed through the air like a heartbeat. The climb was neither rushed nor exhausting. It felt timeless, as if the tower itself stretched the moment into something softer, slower, more deliberate. The sound of the sea beyond the thick walls rose and fell in steady waves, blending with the faint creaks of the old beams and the rustling of unseen drafts that carried the scent of salt and lantern oil. As you neared the top, the air grew clearer, touched by the faintest chill that drifted in through the narrow windows spaced along the stairwell. Then, at last, you stepped into the lantern room, a vast, circular chamber where the great lens of the lighthouse sat, its polished glass gleaming even in the dim light. It turned slowly, methodically, sending its beam out across the endless sea. A golden eye in the darkness, sweeping the horizon in silent vigilance. The glass panes surrounding you revealed the night beyond, a world of mist and stars, of restless waves stretching out to places unseen. The old man moved to the railing, resting a hand upon it as he gazed out toward the distant waters. His expression was unreadable, but there was something reverent in the way he stood there, as if he too had become part of this place, tethered to the rhythm of the waves and the slow, steady turning of the light. Without looking at you, he finally spoke. "Do you know why you're here?" He set the lantern down with a gentle clink, its glow casting long, flickering shadows over the cluttered table. The book, stacked haphazardly, bore cracked leather spines and yellowed pages curled at the edges, as if they had been read and reread for centuries. The charts, worn and creased, showed no familiar coastlines, only strange shifting patterns of waves, celestial markings, and notes scrawled in an ink that shimmered faintly under the lantern's glow. Among them, the jars caught your eye. Some held delicate feathers of iridescent blues and silvers, as though plucked from birds that had never known the weight of the sky. Others cradled shards of coral, their shapes intricate and twisting, glowing softly as if still alive with the pulse of the ocean. The tiny vials held liquid that swirled in mesmerizing patterns, changing hue as the light struck them. Golden one moment, deep indigo the next. The old man leaned slightly on his cane, his fingers wrapping around the polished wood with familiarity. His eyes, dark and knowing, studied you with quiet amusement, as though he had seen your kind before, travelers seekers, souls drawn to this place by something they couldn't yet name. "You must be wondering why you're here," he said, his voice dipping into a softer, more intimate tone, almost a whisper. The words curled in the air like mist, lingering in the quiet stillness between you. "But don't worry. All who find this place are meant to. The sea brings them when they need it most." His gaze drifted past you, toward the great lens of the lighthouse and the endless expanse beyond. Outside, the mist swirled thick and restless, hiding the world you had left behind. The ocean beyond was silent now, stretching into the unknown, its secrets locked beneath the waves. Then the old man turned back to you, his smile tinged with something deeper. Something that spoke of knowledge earned through years spent watching the sea and listening to its whispers. "You may not understand it yet," he continued, lifting a hand to gesture toward the swirling mist beyond the windows. "But this place, it only appears to those who are searching for something. Sometimes they don't even know what that something is." His words settled over you like the hush of the tide, gentle yet unshakable. A strange warmth filled your chest, not unlike the comforting pull of a forgotten memory resurfacing, just beyond reach. The air in the lighthouse seemed to hum with quiet anticipation, as if the very walls were waiting to see what you would do next. The chair embraced you like an old friend, its cushions soft and worn, carrying the faint scent of salt and aged fabric. The quilt draped over it was heavier than it looked, its fabric thick with history, each stitch forming intricate patterns of rolling waves and constellations that seemed almost alive in the dim lantern light. As you traced a fingertip over the embroidered stars, you wondered whose hands had sewn them, what stories they had whispered into the fabric as they worked. The old man settled across from you, his rocking chair groaning in rhythm with the distant lull of the tide. His hands, weathered but steady, rested on the armrests as he regarded you with quiet patience. The lantern's glow flickered between you, casting shifting patterns across the wooden floor, as if the light itself was listening. For a moment, neither of you spoke. The silence was not heavy nor awkward. It was the kind of stillness that invited thought, the kind that allowed the world to breathe. Outside, the mist pressed gently against the glass, blurring the boundary between the lighthouse and whatever lay beyond. The great lens above continued its slow, steady rotation, sending its beam out into the endless night. Finally, the old man exhaled, a sound like wind through hollow reeds. He reached down, pulling a small wooden box from beside his chair, its surface smoothed by time. With careful hands, he set it on the table between you, his fingers lingering over the lid. "I have seen many travellers pass through here," he murmured, his voice as steady as the waves. "Some arrive weary, others lost, and some don't even know what they're searching for until they find it." His fingers tapped the lid of the box, thoughtful, as he studied you. "You," he said finally, with the certainty of someone who had read the tides for decades, "are one of those." He lifted the lid. His voice, low and rhythmic, wove through the room like a tide pulling gently at the shore. The lantern's glow flickered in time with his words, as if even the flame were listening. You followed his gaze to the misty expanse beyond the window, where the sea stretched endlessly, its surface shifting like a restless sleeper, caught between dreams. "She is older than time," he continued, his fingers idly tracing the grain of the wooden box. "Older than this lighthouse older than the stars reflected in her waters. She remembers everything, every whispered wish cast upon her waves, every tear that has fallen into her depths, every promise sealed by the salt on a sailor's lips. His eyes, dark and deep as the ocean itself, flicked back to you, and she does not give up her secrets lightly. He lifted the lid of the box, and inside, nestled within folds of soft, weathered cloth, lay objects that seemed impossibly old, and yet untouched by time. A length of rope, its fibres braided so finely, it shimmered like silver in the dim light. A compass, its needles spinning lazily, never quite settling. A seashell, pale as moonlight, etched with tiny symbols you could not decipher. "These are gifts," he said, carefully lifting the shell between his fingers. "Remnants of stories left behind, waiting to be heard." He turned the shell slightly, letting the lantern's glow illuminate the delicate carvings. The sea does not forget, and neither do those who have listened to her. He held the shell out to you. "Listen closely," he murmured. "Perhaps tonight she has something to tell you." As you took the shell from his outstretched hand, its surface was impossibly smooth, cool against your fingertips. You raised it to your ear, expecting the familiar hush of the ocean's breath. But what you heard was something else entirely. Something deeper, more ancient. A whisper just on the edge of understanding, like words spoken through water, their meaning just out of reach. The old man watched you carefully, his rocking chair creaking in slow, steady rhythm. "She speaks to those who are willing to listen," he said, his voice almost lost in the hush of the room. "Not in words, not in ways we always understand, but she speaks." The sound within the shell shifted, and suddenly you could see it, images forming behind your closed eyes, as if painted by moonlight upon the waves. A great ship, its sails billowing like ghostly wings, gliding silently through a midnight sea. A lone figure standing at the bow, their face turned toward the stars, searching, waiting. A lighthouse. This lighthouse, its beam cutting through the mist like a promise. The vision faded as suddenly as it had come, leaving you breathless, the shell still pressed to your ear. You lowered it slowly, the room around you solid once more, though something within you had changed. The old man gave a knowing nod, as if he had seen what you had seen. "You understand now, don't you?" he murmured. "She's been waiting for you." His words hung in the air, settling into the quiet like embers drifting in the dark. You glanced up through the glass panes of the lighthouse, where the sky had begun to clear, revealing a tapestry of stars shimmering above the restless sea. Their light pulsed gently, as if echoing his words, as if listening. The old man traced a finger along the worn wood of the table between you, his touch light, almost reverent. Long ago, sailors used to follow the stars, trusting them to guide their way across the unknown. They believed each light in the sky was a marker, a voice calling them home. His gaze lifted to meet yours, dark and steady. But the truth is, the stars don't just guide. They remember. A gust of wind rattled the windows, and in its wake, the lighthouse seemed to breathe, settling into the hush of the night. The old man reached for a small wooden box on the table, its edges smoothed by time, its brass latch glinting in the lantern's glow. He slid it toward you, his expression unreadable. "Would you like to hear what they remember?" Your fingers hovered over the box, hesitation flickering through you. And yet, something in the air, something in the weight of his words, urged you forward. Gently, You lifted the latch and opened the lid. Inside, nestled among faded scraps of parchment and fragments of sea glass, lay a collection of tiny, delicate stones, each one dark as midnight, speckled with faint silver flecks. They shimmered ever so slightly, as if they held starlight within them. "These," the old man whispered, "are the echoes of fallen stars. They hold stories the sky no longer carries." He picked up one of the stones and placed it in your palm. "Close your eyes, listen." You obeyed, curling your fingers around the cool, smooth surface. Almost immediately, a warmth bloomed in your chest, a deep, resonant hum vibrating through your bones. Then, just like with a shell, the world around you melted away. A voice, soft, distant and achingly familiar, spoke from the depths of time. His words sent a quiet shiver through you, though not from fear. Rather, it was a kind of recognition, a feeling of standing at the edge of something vast and unseen. The lighthouse, with its steady pulsing glow, suddenly felt more than just stone and glass. It felt aware. You glanced up at the great lens above, its golden light sweeping out into the misty night. The beams moved slowly, rhythmically, as if keeping time with some unseen force, drawing paths upon the water. You could almost believe they were searching, not just for lost ships, but for something deeper, something hidden within the spaces between the stars. The old man watched you with knowing eyes, his fingers tracing slow, absent-minded patterns against the wood of his chair. "She has always stood here," he murmured, almost to himself, "long before the first sailors. Before the first maps, she was built, yes, but she was never just built. She was meant to be." The weight of that thought settled over you like a heavy quilt, warm and comforting. The lighthouse had always been here, waiting, and now you were here too. "Do you know why the sea brought you?" he asked suddenly, his voice softer than before. You hesitated, the answer hovering just beyond your grasp. You weren't lost. Not in the way a ship is lost at sea. But something deep inside you had been drifting for a long time. Adrift, unmoored, carried by unseen currents with no destination in sight. As if he could hear your thoughts, the old man nodded. "Many who come don't know why at first, but the lighthouse does." He reached for the wooden box again, lifting another small stone between his fingers. The silver flecks glowed faintly, pulsing with something like breath. "She sees what we cannot," he continued. "She remembers." He turned the stone over in his palm, before pressing it gently into your hand. "And if you listen, she will show you." The moment the stone touched your skin, warmth spread through your fingers, trickling up your arm like sunlight spilling over water. Your breath caught in your throat, as the world around you began to shift, the mist outside swirling faster, the lantern light flickering, the very air humming with something ancient and unseen. And then, all at once, you were no longer in the lighthouse. His words lingered in the air like mist, curling around you, settling deep into your thoughts. The stone in your hand pulsed faintly, its warmth steady, grounding you even as the world seemed to shift beneath your feet. You glanced down at it, tracing the swirling veins of silver that shimmered like captured moonlight. It felt impossibly old, like something carved from the very bones of the earth, something that had seen more than you could ever begin to understand. The lighthouse keeper watched you with quiet patience, his gaze neither expectant nor demanding. He was simply waiting, waiting for you to see, to understand, to feel what had always been there, just beyond the veil of the ordinary. Outside, the fog thickened, pressing against the windows in slow, swirling tendrils. The light from the beacon above cut through it in steady arcs, painting golden pathways upon the endless sea. You realized then that the mist wasn't simply obscuring the horizon. It was revealing something, shaping itself into images that flickered at the edge of your mind, whispering their stories just out of reach. And then, as if the stone had unlocked some unseen door within you, the visions began. For a fleeting moment, you weren't sitting in the lighthouse anymore. You were somewhere else, everywhere else. You felt the crash of waves against ancient cliffs, the hush of wind through towering pines, the cold kiss of stardust as drifting across a midnight sky. You heard voices, distant but familiar, calling your name like echoes across time. The breath caught in your throat as you reached out, the sensation so real, so overwhelming, that for a moment you thought you could touch it, whatever it was. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, it was gone. The mist outside settled, the air inside the lighthouse stilled, and the old man's voice brought you gently back.